Hello and welcome to another installment of Sega SG-Awesome. Today we're going to look at the fifth game, at least by catalog number, Champion Golf. Now if you're subscribing and actually watching this as the videos are coming out, you'll notice that we skipped the fourth game. This video is going to be coming out. The only thing is that video is Mahjong, and if I'm honest, Mahjong makes absolutely no sense to me. Now I grew up in the West, so I think this is pretty much par for the course. However, I do want to actually go through, learn how to play the game. That way I can actually learn how to play the video game and properly review it. Plus, there are a few things about the game, at least its depictions in movies, that does seem appealing. And although I'm not a fan of golf, I do understand how to play it. So with that being said, let's look at the fifth game, Champion Golf. It's very easy to look at the launch lineup and the early games of the SG-1000 and be unimpressed. You've got those 3 arcade ports, then it just went to Mahjong and golf. And actually this was pretty standard for early 80s Japanese consoles. The Famicom had a very similar launch lineup. They started off with 3 arcade classics, just like the SG-1000 did, where we had those Vic Duel games. Nintendo had Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye. They then followed them up with some board games such as Go, and also several sports games, golf being one of the biggest sellers on the Famicom. Now it's very difficult to find sales data for the SG-1000, so that's why I'm bringing up the Famicom. It's kind of a way to just get information about Sega from its competitors and its contemporaries. Now the Famicom, golf was one of the best-selling games, selling a little over 2.4 million copies. To compare this, that outsold Metroid and The Legend of Zelda in Japan. Now granted, those two games are on the Famicom disk drive, and that may have hamstringed them a bit, but for a more one-to-one comparison, this did outsell Dragon Warrior 2 in Japan, and Dragon Warrior 2 is very much considered a staple in Japan, one of their biggest RPG series. So needless to say, golf games did very well. Another interesting to note fact about this game is on the title screen, it's credited as developed by Sega, but that the original game was made by Logitech. Logitech is a company that has a very small footnote in the history of video games. Looking up their name, the main thing that they seem to be known for is people buying a board for Space Invaders for the arcade, and it turning out to be a Logitech clone of Space Invaders. Other than that, they've had a quiz game that is at least noted on some sites, but doesn't seem to have gained any popularity or success. And they made a golf game, of which Sega then licensed out, or at least bought the rights of, to develop their own version of it for the SG-1000. This is notable because this is a very early, as in one of the first games released on their first console, instance of Sega going out to another company, buying the product name from them, and just programming the game themselves. This is before Nintendo had their, if you make a game for our system, you can't make it for anything else policy. This hints at Sega making the kind of Atari approach to game development their main choice. This is developing games in-house, buying the name, and then just making the game in-house, like Atari did with Pac-Man and everything else like that before Activision did their split. So it is interesting to see Sega take this Atari-type approach to game development this early on, especially since this is the main way that the Master System games are made. Say, 90% of the games on the Master System were made by Sega, even if they were games from another company. Most notably, Double Dragon was made by Sega, and this went on even until the Mega Drive Genesis area, where some of the Capcom arcade classics such as Strider and Final Fight were made by Sega for their consoles. So let's look at the game proper at this point. This is the first sports game for the SG-1000, the first in a line of games that would all share a very similar naming structure of champion, then insert various sports title here type of naming structure. And now this game definitely seems like a very early release. Just looking at it, it is insanely basic, and from a modern perspective, just looks awful. And it looks especially awful when compared to golf on the Famicom. However, you have to keep in mind that the Famicom version of golf came out in 1984. This one is definitely a 1983 release. Looking at just a quick list of golf games on Wikipedia, the 3 games that it lists that came before this one was Golf on the Magnavox Odyssey, Golf on the Atari 2600, and Pro Golf on the Apple II. These games are noticeably worse and do not share very much with modern golf, so this game does actually come out to be fairly groundbreaking in that it seems like a modern golf game. The first golf game I could find was the Magnavox Odyssey Golf, and then the Atari 2600 Golf came right after that. Those are basically the same game, they just look like clones of each other, and they play very odd. You honestly actually move the character around the golf course, which sounds kind of cool on the surface, but is not fun, and the hitting's just awful. Then there's the Apple II version, which is almost like a text adventure on a golf course. Very odd. This game actually gets the modern concepts of golf down, and this game being the SG-1000 game. It has a lot of the basic structures where most golf games have the 3-button type of hit style where you hit the button once to start the swing, hit the button a second time to select your power, and then the third time to select your accuracy. This game is very similar to that. The difference is you do not push a button to initiate your swing, so this makes this game basically a 2-button press swing. If you look in the upper left of the game screen, you'll see a man who's constantly swinging, just looks like he's hacking away at the ground. So you're constantly swinging. What you do to actually shoot or swing in this golf game is on the upstroke, you press the button at the power that you want. So basically the longer the arc length of the swing, the more powerful the swing. And you want to do it on the upstroke. If you do it on the downstroke, you'll end up scratching or hitting the ground or something, and the ball won't go very far. Then you hit the second button just before it actually hits the ball. If you do this, it should be a pretty good hit. There's no hooking or slicing, at least as far as I can tell. The problem is, this doesn't always work very well, or it's very difficult to get used to. There were an entire segment of the game, one hole, where I was just constantly not hitting the ball. The aiming structure is very odd as well. Now, it's not necessarily bad, but it's odd. You have what I'm assuming is your caddy along the edge of the screen. You're basically always going to hit the ball from a straight line from where the ball is to the caddy, making those the 2 points that define a line. So you're going to move your caddy around to try to actually go through and get the spot correct. You do have a limited number of clubs that you can go through and select, so this is actually fairly new at this time. The course consists of about 9 holes, which seems appropriate for this type of game. This isn't a game that you're going to want to go through and play more than 9 holes. To be honest, 9 holes seems about right. It takes a couple holes to even get used to the control structure. After that, you'll play it for a little bit, but you won't want to go past 9 very much. You'll probably end up getting to hole 6 or 7, at least I usually do, and then you're like, well, I'm close enough to 9 holes, let's go ahead and finish this out. And now for the big question, is the game fun? From a modern perspective, no, it's not. I mean, of course it's not. Most sports games have really just gotten better over the years. Unless if you're looking for that very arcade style in the 16-bit era, they have gotten better. And this game didn't even have that arcade style. It's really almost like an evolution of that Apple II text-based golf game. And for that reason, it's fun as a curiosity. If you want to see kind of the progression that games take, and I think sports games are a really fantastic way to see the progression of video games, this is not that bad of a game. It's almost that missing link between the very proto-text-based golf games like we saw on the Apple II and the 16-bit golf games that kind of dominated the era until we got to the ultra simulation style of game that we're at now. But ultimately, I was surprised by Champion Golf. Looking at the screenshots, I thought I would hate this game. But I came out actually enjoying it and played it a few times. Now, I'm probably not going to go back and play it again. It's not that fun. But it was a nice curiosity, and I don't think my time was wasted on it. So use that to see whether this game would be one that you'd want to check out or not.